Major General Robert B. Ostenberg, U.S. Army retired, will be talking about our Homeland Defense. He will tell us about U.S. Northern Command, known as Northcom, and Northern American Aerospace Defense Command, known as NORAD, what they have done and what they are doing. Stay tuned for this.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
I'd like to introduce Major General Robert B. Ostenberg, U.S. Army retired. Thank you for coming once again, General. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Pleased to be with you.
Now, a lot goes on in different government agencies with their surveillance and so forth of the airports and the seaports and borders and all our infrastructures, both financial and physical. But we're going to be talking about actual defense. And please tell us about Northcom and about NORAD.
Well, NORAD was created in 1958, and it's a binational command, and that's between Canada and the United States. It was created to protect us from evil approaches from mainly missiles. So certainly, its primary mission is the aerospace defense and warning, and also to command the aerospace environment. In 2006, they added Maritime Warning because we realized there were a lot of things that were coming into this country and into Canada through sea approaches, and so that was a requirement to take care of the full mission complementing the air and the sea. Now, after 9/11, 2001 and early 2002, it was obvious that we needed to protect our nation not just from looking out, but from looking within. And so they created a U.S. Northcom. The commander of NORAD was a 4-star U.S. general. The deputy is a 3-star Canadian general. In Northcom, the same general commands both organizations. And then he has a deputy commander that's a U.S. general or admiral. And so that kind of a command, he gets to look at both the air and then the new mission, which was security of the United States, is number one. Number two, they have some responsibility to react to internal natural disasters and serving and helping the civilian authorities. And then number three is security cooperation with all the other agencies to make sure our country is secure. So that's kind of morphed into a different approach than when I was there from 2005 to 2008, because the amount of information that we learned from Katrina, for instance, in 2005, and how to and how not to do things, how to respond, which was done very well, but responding in a way that is a complete response and takes care of all avenues of need and security. In Katrina, you might recall that the mayor of New Orleans, Mayor Nagin, was trying to do a good job, and Governor Blanco was trying to do her job, but that was the first time that we really had a disaster that completely destroyed all infrastructure. And so the local authorities had a very tough time, and they did, however, get the National Guard out and start getting help in that area. But let me explain how Northcom got involved. In a normal disaster of any sort, whether it be a fire or flood, or and it can be escalated into a lot of different things, but first the local responders. The fire chief and the police chief will get their forces involved. If they can't handle it, then they go maybe to the county, and they could get the county involved. Next it goes to the state, And when the governor deems that it's just overwhelming for the state, he then will call the president and ask for support. Northcom and NORAD are ever in the lead for any of their actions until they're given the authority. So in the Katrina, Northcom had to wait until the president said act. Then in that natural disaster, they would then appoint FEMA as the agency in charge. Northcom then would work for FEMA, not in the lead, but as a resource for FEMA, and then bring all the resources of the military with it. And if it were a forest fire, then it would be the Department of Forestry. And so we would then fall on them and actually act in conjunction with them and in coordination with the Department of Forestry and, again, the state and local governments.
Well, the recent flooding in Colorado resulted in the largest helicopter rescue operation since Katrina. And was Northcom involved in that as well then?
They were. And interestingly enough, it was in a little bit different sequence than what I just gave you. If you're near a military base, we have cooperative agreements with the communities that surround the military base for a very quick emergency response that can come directly from the commander if there is life and property at risk. And so in the case of the Colorado flooding, there were 1,700 people that were in very remote areas that they just didn't know how they were doing or could they get them out. They tried in a number of different ways with the very capable local and state resources, but it was evident that they needed something a little bit more. And so the Fort Carson enabled the 40th Combat Aviation Group to go ahead. There's a brigade that send Chinooks and Black Hawk helicopters to go and try and help with the rescue of those people that were stranded. And without that quick response, lives would have been lost. They just don't have the resources to get things moving very quickly in that arena, and it really worked very well. So the ability to go directly and assist is a great resource to have. But again, it's around a military base. We've done the same thing in Kansas when we had tornadoes 4 or 5 years ago that devastated complete towns. The military has the resources to help clean up and search and rescue and things like that. It's a very important resource to have, and it works really well. Again, on if it were a major thing that the communities can handle, like Katrina, they tried, then it goes through the other process, however.
Well, what's a dual task commander?
In 2012, because of the Defense Authorization Act, and as a result of I'm going back to that evil one, the Katrina incident, we in the government and elected officials realized that in some disasters, it's going to be very beneficial to have somebody that has dual status, and by that I mean that they have the authority from the governor to take action within the state, and that can be very early on, and they also have the authority to command the active component and the reserve component military. So to explain, Title 32 is what authorizes the government and the state and their National Guard falls under Title 32 to act when the governor sees the need to react to any type of an emergency. The federal forces operate under Title 10, and therein lies the rub. If you have something that involves both forces, Title 10 and Title 32, then you need a dual-hatted commander that can actually do that. And normally, in most cases, it's going to be a National Guard, a 2-star general, could be a 1-star, and we've had even down to colonels in some of the operations that we've seen since Katrina. that one individual now has the unity of command over all those forces, and it's really makes a big difference.
It
because
seems a lot more efficient to have,
it
you don't
actually
have
is.
two things going at once. It can be better coordinated.
And very early on, it was discussed in 2007, but it was probably one of the most significant improvements in the process since in the last 10 years, the last decade.
Well, speaking of catastrophes, how well are we prepared for a weapons of mass destruction attack here?
Well, far better off than we may have been 10 or 15 or even 20 years ago. The preparation for an attack, an unknown attack, is always difficult. So the question would be, okay, is it going to be nuclear, biological, chemical, using radioactive type of devices? So they have, it's the acronym for that, and I didn't give them I should have probably given them in the right order, is CBRN, CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. Those types of things to improve, how do you improve in those? Well, technology will take care of that, because we need to, if we are attacked, need to work in an environment that is now a dirty environment. We need to save lives, and so you need to know how to decontaminate, and you need people that are specially trained for the environment that they're going to be in. And we have now 18,000 trained individuals, both in the National Guard and the Army Reserve, and other reserve forces also have their share too, and the active component. And they are there just to react toward one of those 4 incidences that might occur. We also have in the force in the Army Reserve has more medical resources, especially if you're going to need a medical that is set up in a temporary site, in temporary facilities, to react to those types of events. And they can do that in a clean environment by decontaminating the individuals coming in, have decontamination of items that they use, and those things. So it's great to be prepared. Thank goodness we have not been tested in that area, but they do mission testing all the time. Number 1, we get better equipment. Number 2, and number 3, they have exercises where they will recreate a situation that is very similar to what might happen, and see how they can react to it. And they don't do them just in one location, they do them around the country, so we can get a good feel for the training level of all those that have been that need to be involved in that kind of an incident.
What about ballistic missiles?
Well, we have just beefed up in Alaska the number of anti-ballistic missile systems that we have. And I guess I'll go back to a reference when I was at Northcom in 4th of July, I believe 2006. The North Koreans were going to launch a Taepodong-2 missile. It was a test flight, but they had been working on this as a multiple stage rocket that had the capability of going long distances. And so there was great concern within our country what it could hit. Could hit Japan, could hit South Korea, could hit some of our allied locations. And potentially, if they got better distance out of it, could hit the continental United States. So as the launch approached, and it was something that was known by the U.S. that it would be taking place in a certain period of time, the decision had to be made. Okay, do we let this thing go, or do we shoot it down? And there was a lot of conversation about, well, you guys haven't practiced this. Have you ever taken a shot, and are you going to miss? And there's an arc that comes up and comes down, and you have certain places along that arc that if it's too shallow, you can't shoot yet. But once it gets up there, but at the speed these are going, there's only a small period of time to be able to hit something like that. But we were very confident that it could be done. Well, the missile launched, and we did have a plan to deal with it if need be, but I've seen reports where it only lasted 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 40 seconds, but it didn't last long, and then it just self-destructed. It didn't, and they have not been able to really have a successful launch of that particular missile. But the talk still went on, what if? Could you guys, could you hit the darn thing? Well, a year and a half later, we had an incident where we had a satellite that was an observation satellite that was put up into space. And this was a couple of years before, so it's been up there a while, and it's in an orbit, but the orbit is failing. Since it failed very early on, the fuel tank on that whole satellite was full, and it's full of, if it works broken and exposed to the atmosphere or on the ground, the pretty nasty chemicals that would create a lot of problems and kill people. And they also thought if it does fall into Earth's orbit and then is going to come down, it might hit in the southwestern United States, and the fuel tank probably would survive the re-entry. So the decision was made that they needed to try and shoot this thing down. Now I want to say it was like about 334 nautical miles away when they did take the shot. The window to make the shot on this particular day that they did this was 10 seconds. And the missile was launched from an Aegis cruiser, which is a cruiser that's in the west of Hawaii. So you have the seas going like this, and you have the guidance system, and it's like, wow, is this really going to work? They fired the missile within the window, and if they missed it, they'd have to wait some time, and it would be a little bit tougher shot. But they did launch it. The closing rate, from what I know, not what's published, it was about 22,000 miles an hour as these things came toward each other, and they did hit it, and it was destroyed. And the tank was not a problem. The things in the tank was not a problem. But it really kind of said, well, I told you we could.
It makes me feel good.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, talking about the missile that the North Korean shot that fizzled, didn't go out, was that a problem with the missile or with their launcher?
It was probably it was a malfunction within the missile itself,
okay.
and it could have been guidance or whatever. But they didn't self-destruct it. Put it that way. And
They do have those, I hear, the mobile land launchers now that they can transport around and shoot from different places, which is scary to me because then that prevents preemptive strikes if you had to.
well, if they're those, that is true. If it depends on the distance from the target. So I think we're concerned because of our allies in the area there. And that same 4th of July, which is the day that we saw this being fired, it was the 5th of July there. And in that same period of time, days before, they had fired some of those short-range missiles, which they have done on many occasions, but they do test those, and we aren't concerned about our own defense when it comes to those, but they're continuing to better their product. They've gotten some help, as I understand, from the Iranians. So maybe if they ever get one that will fly, we need to readdress it. But we're constantly looking at it. The United States is very capable, and I think can address that, and have since 1958 been doing a great job with NORAD doing that.
So it's kind of scary with all these kind of renegade type nations having nuclear capabilities. I'm feeling very vulnerable.
Well, again, here in the United States, we're a long way from the sources of those, but we can't just. And we are concerned about, as I said, the NORAD's mission is aerospace, basically security and warning. We have a long way for a missile to come from any other nation, but you have to be also concerned about our allies, and make sure that they have those types of weapons too. And as we've seen in smaller wars where smaller missiles have been launched, they have the Patriot missile system, defensive positions. We use them, in Kuwait, and we use them in other places. So that takes care of that. To have North Korea fire a nuclear missile at South Korea, they're probably going to get a lot of they have problems if the fallout affects them too, and I'm not sure if they would do that. That's above my level.
And then Iran, how worried do we need to be about Iran?
I'm sure are dealing with it at the highest levels. It's sometimes surprising that they are making the strides that they're making and unabated, but I think that's right now in a political arena, trying to make sure that we can protect ourselves. It's not a military issue for us. As you recall, several years ago, they tried to set up some defensive positions in Europe, and the Russians didn't like that, and others didn't like that. But it kind of made sense to me, because it's not to protect against Russia. It was to protect from other rogue states that might get the resources and the ability to shoot a missile, south to north. So, but that's the political environment is such that I hope that they can stem those issues.
So our defense system is always contending with that. Now we hear about, downsizing the Army and downsizing our supplies and so forth. We're not going to get rid of any of our missile protection, end of our missiles, are we?
No, as
Defense
I just mentioned, we
missiles.
just beefed them up.
Okay.
There were
You said Alaska.
another 14. Well, these are missiles that are capable of doing the intercontinental, receiving on the receiving end of those attacks. So, so we have defenses to send things, as I mentioned, like the Tapodong, if it could get over here. So that is, I think that we're in pretty good shape there because we're beefing that up. Yes, the rest of the military, I'm talking all the forces, are going to have to take a look at their structure and be able to keep enough structure to be able to react to all contingencies. But certainly it's more difficult, certainly with 2 or 3 simultaneous incidences to be able to handle those.
What about the cyber world?
The cyber world is a domain kind of being looked at by TSA, which is the security agency versus the Homeland Defense. But we have a U.S. Cybercom, which is involved as a partner. The military is a partner in that area. If you talk to U.S. corporations today, there's not many that haven't been hacked by overseas organizations, not to mention any particular countries, but there are some that are very active in that arena. So Cyber Command is really important, as is the effort to protect the U.S., because when you think about the military side of it, most of our equipment and everything else is all related to the high-tech things that are vulnerable through hacking, and I think it's a key area that we're looking at to make sure that we can keep ahead of it by innovation versus just trying to keep with it. They're leaning forward and trying to look at how we can protect ourselves, but it's in an environment that it's very difficult to do.
Well, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to leave us with today?
I'll tell you a couple things that I found interesting. I was one of 5 individuals that was a domestic attack assessor. And what that means is if anything that looks, smells, or walks, or talks like we're being attacked within the United States, the domestic attack assessor at Northcom basically is given the mission to get evaluations on what happened, make assessments, look at the resources, and then the first call is to Secretary of Defense and then the President of the United States. and with recommendations. And so monthly, we would have to be recertified in the skills of being able to take care of that mission. And I was down being recertified in our in a secure area where we can role play these types of things. But it's also in a command center that also gets the feed from other things that might be happening around the country. And in the middle of that, we're listening to a conversation about a takeover of an airplane. And so they came on and said, "Are you telling me that you're in the process of a hostile takeover?" And the pilot said, "Yes." And so we quickly scrambled planes to intercept this aircraft. In the area there were nuclear reactors and other things. This was a corporate type jet. And what the problem was not a takeover of the plane to crash into anything. It was, had his cell phone mic on, talking to somebody, while he had his headset on, talking to this individual. And so we were hearing about a hostile takeover of his corporation.
Thanks for coming and explaining these things to us.
Well, I hope it's a little bit clear. At least you know how those agencies get
Yes.
involved now,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because the states do have the first say when it comes to natural disasters and things happening in their state.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you.